Hello and welcome to the big picture. The role of civil society groups, NGOs and their donor and funding agencies have been a matter of debate and controversies for some time now in this country. The governments have always looked at some of these organizations and agencies with suspicion whenever their activities did not suit the interest of the government or those running them. On the other hand, there have been some organizations and agencies whose role have been suspect, and there are enough rules and laws created to deal with them. In the recent past, some of these NGOs, civil society groups and donor agencies have come under the radar of the government. Some of them have been kept under watch, some of their transactions have been scrutinized, and their funding sources have been blocked or made very difficult. The latest to find itself in the watch list of the Ministry of Home Affairs is the Ford Foundation, one of the largest funding agencies in the world. The foundation has been in India for over 60 years and has been funding many activities, including government ones. However, its role in funding some Gujarat and Mumbai-based NGOs have now come under scrutiny. Today, we'll look at the whole approach towards the NGOs, civil society groups, and the increasing scrutiny on them, while asking the question, is it reasonable or restrictive? To discuss this, I have with me D.C. Pathak, former Director, Intelligence Bureau, Anjali Bharadwaj, Secretary, National Campaign for People's Right to Information, Biraj Patnaik, a social activist, will be on the phone line, and Amitabh Behar, Executive Director, National Foundation of India. Welcome to all of you. Amitabh, your National Foundation of India is one of the groups, or what would you call them, NGOs?
Partners.
Or partners with the Ford Foundation. You get quite significant funding from them. So how do you look at this, this Ford Foundation being put on the watch list?
I would say that it's deeply saddening and distressing, and it's going to have a very, very adverse impact on several sectors. And let me start by saying first on the frontline workers. A significant number of frontline workers are supported by grants of the Ford Foundation. Also, importantly, a lot of institutions. And let me just to get a historical sense, you talked of it, but if you look at the history of Ford in this country, it's remarkable. I was there when they completed 50 years. It has supported Indian Institute of Management, to Lal Bahadur Shastri Academy,
Lal Bahadur Shastri Academy, Mussoorie, which trains the
administrative service officers, to the National Institute of Design. Interestingly, including a planning commission initial scoping grant of how the planning commission should function. They have had a remarkable history. A lot of those institutions still get supported, probably not those big ones, but institutions which are playing absolutely cutting-edge role in terms of changing the developmental discourse in this country, asserting the rights of common people. The third, I think, which is, the most phenomenal contribution of agencies like Ford, certainly led by Indian civil society, and that's investing in ideas. Green Revolution, hugely supported initially by the Ford. As in, we, because of environmental concerns, now can look back and say that there were problems with Green Revolution, but at this juncture, we also know that the food sovereignty that we talk of, Green Revolution played a critical role. Move on to the population program. Again, problems with that. So we have no problem in being critical of what Ford did. But that was an important program which then government upscaled. Initiatives like urban planning. So if you look at Calcutta, which was the first metropolitan urban plan supported by the Ford Foundation. Joint forest management. The first idea of support came from Ford Foundation. Significant ideas which have completely transformed the landscape of developmental thinking in this country has been partnered with Ford. All this is going to take a hit. And mind you, my biggest anger is that Ford already is in some ways on the watch list. Ford is unlike other foreign donors because of its agreement with the government of India, has to send each grant for approval to the government already. And still you talk of this kind of watch list, which I think is complete political vendetta, I would say.
To call it political vendetta, what the government, the MHA, while issuing this direction yesterday, an order actually. They say that, national interest and security. They are doing it in the interest of national interest and security. Mr. Pathak, as Amitabh pointed out, here is a foundation. We'll broaden the debate, scope of the debate beyond Ford Foundation, but talking specifically with at this point of time, since the time you were heading the bureau, I'm sure this organization has been there around for the last 60 years in this country. Now to see it as some kind of a national security risk, how do you look at it?
Considering the backdrop of this having become a contention essentially between individuals and the government response, which actually is a response on behalf of the nation, right? Not the individuals who form the political executive. I think a couple of things will bring some objectivity to the debate. One, this, whatever is being said, Ford Foundation having been put in watch list, is a spin-off of certain curbs which the government in its wisdom has felt must be imposed. It's not a curb on Ford Foundation itself. The flow of funds will come, except that for the sake of transparency, MHA will like to keep itself promptly informed of who is getting what, right? This is essentially the...
This was not there earlier?
No, in some form, this kind of a monitoring and watch exists. Sometimes it is dormant. I think the situation...
No, dormant is... It is dormant because certain agencies of the government don't do their work.
I'm not going to let any value judgments be...
No, it's not value judgment. I'm asking...
I mean, if somebody starts with this thing that the government is out to do this and that against an individual, that doesn't hold water. Now, I told you the character of the... Why Ford Foundation has been touched and in what manner. It's not in a very injurious manner. It's not at their cost. It's a cost of transparency for us to see what funds are coming. That basically, this is what the watch list is about. Second, now the organizations, individuals, I think you certainly are aware that throughout the Cold War, I mean, if you want to hit the country, you don't have to invade it with force, right?
No, certainly not.
So Cold War was a good example of how the ideologically divided two superpowers were hitting at each other through the NGOs. I mean, it's a question of, it's what I call soft subversion, if you know the meaning. Soft subversion. I'm not saying spies being floated, but soft ways of, these are the... So, not all, I mean, this country has thousands and thousands of well-meaning NGOs being, busy with causes. And you know what? A good NGO, a convincing NGO should have three things. Its cause for which it fights must be very transparent, very clear. Number two, its funding should be very transparent. And one expects that the leadership has a frugal lifestyle. I'm not saying, because I read in the media, lifestyle issues sometimes attract attention. So that NGOs can be an instrumentality of serving somebody else's cause. I mean, why should we totally rule it out?
No, nobody is ruling it out, but there has to be certain evidence of this. I think...
I'll close with the third point.
Yes.
That is important. That's the basic of this debate. I mean, this big country, I've headed this organization called Intelligence Bureau. Right after independence, for decades, it has been serving as the one organization where senior officers work for 16 hours without being asked. And this is, once I told Prime Minister Narasimha Rao in some situation. The point is that this country must learn to respect the findings of the national monitoring responsible agencies, which is the first casualty in the debate, right? So, but the specifics we can go into.
No, we'll come to that. Anjali, I know you are very anxious to respond to this, but let me get Vinay Sasarubudde. Vinay Sasarubudde is the National Vice President of the BJP. He's on the phone line with us. Mr. Sasarubudde, the decision of the... Sorry, okay.
Yeah,
you're available on the OB itself. Very good. Mr. Sasarubudde, the question is the government, the Ministry of Home Affairs, has come down on Ford Foundation. It is not just the question of Ford Foundation. The whole attitude towards donor agencies, towards funding agencies, towards civil society groups, towards NGOs. There is a complaint, there is a concern that ever since the last year or so, ever since this new government has come into place, these kind of groups and agencies have been under extensive scrutiny. You think that this criticism is valid?
Absolutely not. See what has happened in our country for last several years. The voluntary sector organizations, I would not call them NGOs. That is not certainly a right term to be used for these kinds of organizations. The voluntary sector organizations were facing several challenges, several crises they were facing, and one of the crises was that of credibility. As you are aware that several government schemes are being implemented via the voluntary sector organizations, and you find that even though the involvement of voluntary sector organization is at a very huge level, the impact of social service, welfare projects, welfare schemes has not been very effective, and to some extent voluntary sector organizations are also responsible. Unfortunately, many a times voluntary sector organizations enjoy the benefits in both ways. On one hand, they are considered as holy cows, which is very correct in a way, because they are going extra mile and working for the society in a selfless manner. So one need to salute them for their service. At the same time, they need to follow some rules and regulations. They need to abide the law of the land. They need to take forward the genuineness or the element of credibility along with them. If it doesn't happen, and if there is some kind of a atmosphere of doubt about their affairs, the way they conduct their service projects, I think it is necessary that there is some regulating agency. Even though there is no regulating agency as such, there are certain mechanisms which are well laid down as per the Constitution, one of which is the Foreign Contributions Regulation Act.
Okay.
Now, this act is not an invention of the Bharatiya Janata Party.
No, certainly
government.
not.
This act was there. What the government is expecting, that you should abide by the law, that's it.
Okay.
I am also representing one voluntary sector organization. We are also getting an FCRA certificate. We are abiding by the law. Everybody need to abide by the law, that's it.
Okay. Anjali, how do you react to this? Abide by the specific order of the Ministry of Home Affairs is telling the Ford Foundation that they are funding those organizations or agencies or civil society groups which don't have FCRA, that is Foreign Contribution Regulation Act, under that registration. So that is why they are doing this kind of scrutiny of them.
Well, let me say that I don't think there's anybody who disagree with the fact that anybody who's operating in the country has to operate according to the laws of the land. I don't even think that that's the point of debate today. What we are discussing, and I think that the fundamental issue in that, is there any kind of singling out of organizations, whether they are non-governmental voluntary organizations that are working on the ground, whether they are individuals or they are donor agencies, if they raise certain issues. And I think what is happening even in this particular case, and I'm not holding a brief for any organization at all, what I'm saying is that if there are concerns, let those concerns be tabled. There are mechanisms, there are laws in this country under which, if there is a problem, that can be investigated, and there has to be an institutional response to it. Unfortunately, for example, we have now the Lokpal law, which was passed more than 1 year ago, under which all organizations that actually come under the FCRA have a certain amount of funding above a certain amount would come under that and would have to be accountable to the people of this country. Now, that law is not being operationalized by this government. If there is a concern, the government is so concerned about corruption, is so concerned about issues of the law not being upheld, it would set up an anti-corruption mechanism and it would operationalize it.
Anjali, this is not about corruption, this is about national interest.
It's about
they are saying national interest and security.
We are being told that this is about accountability, this is about being transparency, and in that rubric, it's about national security and so on. Now, the fact is that to put an organization under a watch list, what does that mean? Unless there is a system that the government has in place which is uniform across, what this kind of suggests is a certain big brother behavior, is a certain kind of witch hunting. And I think that whether we look at the Priya Pillai case, in the Greenpeace case, or this particular case, what comes through very clearly is that if there is something that is inconvenient that is being brought up, that is being flagged by certain individuals or organizations, those organizations are being flagged out. And I think that is a great concern in a democracy, because in a democracy, if organizations, individuals, civil society groups, voluntary organizations are not given the space for adequate dissent, this democracy is not going to work.
Let me get Mr. Sasrabuddhe. This is the concern. The concern is that, you know, it can end up as a witch hunt. It can end up, you know, as targeting certain individuals or groups because it is not convenient to certain people. In this case, there's a Ford Foundation thing. One second, sir, let me finish. 1 second, let me finish my question. In this case, as far as the Ford Foundation case is concerned, it is directly linked to the Sabrang Trust of Teesta Setalwad and her husband Javed Anand. This whole thing seems to have flown out from there. So, you know, this concern expressed that there is some kind of a witch hunt happening here.
I think it is a case of much ado about nothing. Basically, this has been the practice of the Home Ministry, and you will see that there are several organizations, and I can name organizations from right, left, center, every other ideological view, who have been denied FCRA simply because their accounts and other formalities were not completed. And therefore, the Ministry of Home Affairs is going by the law. There is absolutely no question of witch hunt. You cannot do a wrong and get away with it. That is the clear message that this government wants to give. Why are so many people simply indulging in casting aspersions and expressing doubts when there is no evidence to suggest to that effect? And if somebody has committed wrong, why are you siding by them? Those who have committed wrong, they are culprits. The law will take its own course. You should be saying that let the law take its own course. Instead, you are shielding them and you are casting aspersions about the designs, about the motives of the government. This is absolutely not acceptable, and therefore let the law take its own course. If you have not done anything wrong, let it be established. Otherwise, there are courts and there are several other other mechanisms as well available for everybody here. And nobody is here to stifle the voice of the civil society. We are all for civil society.
Okay.
And the voluntary sector also, in fact, Gujarat is the only government which has a department for voluntary organizations. Let me tell those who are casting aspersions.
Okay. Yes, Anjali, you want to react quickly, or Amitabh?
Yeah, sure.
See, what he's saying is that, you know, MHA is doing its job. There is no witch hunt. If you're transparent, if your accounts are good, if you don't have anything to worry about, why are you bothered?
So just, you know, 3 quick responses, Girish. The first one, that it's not just this current regime. This has been a pattern even with the previous regime.
Absolutely.
And the space has been constantly shrinking.
It was.
Second, let me...
Sorry, 1 second. Yeah. 1 second. I mean, we have to bring this to the notice. Sure. Since you spoke about the previous regime, I think we had a discussion at that point of time. I think Mr. Pathak also was there at that point of time on the panel. The former Prime Minister saying that, you know, some of these anti-nuclear activists were part of the, some kind of a design of the Western governments.
Second, as somebody who works with the civil society, I say with full responsibility that I think the onus is certainly on us in terms of ensuring accountability and transparency. And I'm fairly confident, and I say this with great sense of responsibility, that the accountability standards are higher in the NGOs. And I'm willing to challenge a lot of corporates and others. You can come and check any record that you want to check. Third, when you talk of these specific cases, you see a very clear pattern. The groups which are asking tough questions of the government, which are trying to make government accountable, which are really speaking truth to power, they are the ones who are being targeted. In the case of Ford Foundation, as I said, I have not really heard a response to that. Every grant which is being made is sent for prior approval to the Government of India. Only after the grant is approved. I have had my grant being held on by the government for a year or so. And only when they got the approval, it's sent to the concerned department. As
even though you were FCRA registered.
Absolutely, I have full FCRA registration in my organization, but still it goes to the Government of India. From Government of India, it goes to probably the relevant ministries, to the state governments, and then finally you get the approval. What more due diligence do you want? And if there are violations, I would really be keen as a citizen of this country to ask the government to tell us where the violations are.
Okay, Mr. Pathak, these are, here is what he says. He represents one of the larger civil society groups which gets a large funding from the Ford Foundation. And he's saying that any funds coming to them, which is FCRA registered, it's already, there is a lot of scrutiny before it comes, before they get the funds. And why this second level of scrutiny?
I find it slightly difficult to understand this sudden wide concern on the part of everybody. Why move from individual to general? Let's stick to what could have been.
You want to stick to individual?
No, I'm talking of the entities which have invited whatever debate this is. The point is that what is the content of anything being unsavory about an organization? One, a rule you have violated, rule FCRA, which is a simpler part. And if the rule have not been violated, you will question the authorities that you have been wrongly. The second part is, which you mentioned in passing, and which essentially is the part with which nobody should have any. Whether there is something unacceptable about the working of an entity in a manner that, one, it gives the impression that is somebody else's cause, reflected in two things. No, India's domestic scene is very vulnerable.
Mr. Pathak, let us not talk in abstract terms. In this case, or in the case of the last 1.5 to 2 years, there has been, or some years, it's not just this government, the previous government also, they have been having concerns and they have been expressing their opinion.
Being very specific.
My question is this.
I'm telling you.
One second, sir, my question is this. Intelligence Bureau, which does a lot of this work, because in the Greenpeace case also they came out with a report which has been contested by a lot of people. Now, my question is, Intelligence Bureau, does it work? Is it able to work independently in these matters, or is it influenced by the color of the government or the views of the government?
This is like killing the whole debate by raising this kind of a question. I mean, after all,
this is the biggest concern.
For several decades, Intelligence Bureau has worked as the mother organization for domestic security, regardless of whosoever was ruling the country. And except for one or two individuals, the organization never came into any kind of a doubt of the kind you are harboring. Now, the point is, what would this monitor do? I mean, you should be aware that our domestic scene can be very vulnerable to certain kind of activities, right? I'm not referring to any individual organization. Number two, because these two things have been referred to, they come in the papers as the basis on which monitoring agency took notice. Second, that now the national security is inseparable from economic security. And a good way of hitting a growth anywhere is to obstruct and make sure that
Mr. Pathak, nobody will deny all these things. Now we are talking of, if there is a problem, if there is already rules and procedures laid down, the biggest concern, I think we have Biraj Patnaik on the phone line. Biraj, this whole debate, we are looking at it from one side. The other side also is there. The responsibility of the civil society groups, the NGOs and things like that. You think that they are also in some way they have also been responsible for this kind of regulations coming upon them?
No, I think firstly let me agree with Mr. Sahasrabudin's assertion that many large organizations are violating FCRA, and the largest NGO in the country is the RSS. And the RSS and its affiliates have a track record of raising foreign money. They are large recipients of foreign money, right-wing organizations. And we have seen that money being put to very bad use in case of Gujarat, in case of other places. And we know that. It's been documented, it's been recorded. So, yes, there are some organizations which are misusing, and the RSS and its front organizations are leading in its misuse, and they have never been censored even once by the Ministry of Home Affairs. Number two, the larger question, whether civil society should take the blame, is really in not highlighting this issue as much as it should have. Why is it that the National Advisory Council or the other civil society organizations which are active on a range of social issues did not adequately raise their voice when Mr. Chidambaram brought in the changes in the SCRA law? Why were we silent when the IT Act was amended to make it harder for NGOs by Mr. Pranab Mukherjee when he was finance minister. The NDA government is using every law which has been amended by the UPA to harass NGOs now. So therefore, this question remains that I'm not doubting that there may be some organizations which are misusing, but the ones that are being victimized are certainly not the ones. Number two, we talk of evidence. Mr. Pathak has been saying there is clear evidence, there is clear evidence. Please show that evidence. Nothing is being put in the public domain. Vague generalizations made by the Intelligence Bureau are being used to harass NGOs. In the case of Greenpeace, to say that the courts did take a stand. Please read the judgment of the Delhi High Court. The Intelligence Bureau, despite all its assertions, could not provide a shred of evidence in the court of law which could have got a judgment in their favor. And the order was struck down. As I'm sure when Greenpeace goes back to court, the next order of the government will also be struck down. But what this is doing is this is creating a very negative image of India abroad. It is showing India to be a very intolerant society. It is painting the government in a light that this government will not tolerate internal dissent. And this is certainly going to affect not just the NGO sector, but also investor sentiment.
Okay.
People are not going to come in and invest in a country which does not respect democracy. And the BJP government must understand that.
Okay, Biraj. Mr. Sasrabuddhe, the question is this, some of the questions raised by Biraj, and also when you're talking, when MHA says that, in the interest of, in national interest and national security, we are doing this, and then seeks accountability from these organizations and seeks transparency from these organizations. The government, the agencies working with for the government, they are not transparent, or they don't show that kind of accountability when they raise questions about these organizations. Don't you think that, as Biraj rightly puts it, put it on the public domain? What is there? What is it that you have found against them? That doesn't seem to be happening.
I think this is a larger question. The government is accountable to the parliament. In parliament, everything is discussed. Everybody, all are, free to raise issues in the parliament. There is a petitions committee. You can make a petition to the parliament. You have the Right to Information Act also. So everything is there, and therefore I think government has enough transparency mechanisms at its disposal.
The mechanisms is there,
now
but whether
that
it has been...
Mr. Viraj Patnaik has unnecessarily brought in the issue of RSS. Let me tell you that in fact I was wondering why so many of our friends here are not raising the issue of RSS, which is their favorite pastime. Without assailing RSS, they just cannot finish this discussion. But let me tell him that RSS and affiliate organizations have never received any funding either from Rockefeller Foundation or Ford Foundation or any such organizations to whom people are now attributing some motives. But what I am trying here to explain is that why should the civil society organizations, or let's say a section of them, be afraid of transparency? After all, it is all about accountability and transparency. If the Home Ministry is saying that we are going to put you under watch, the hell is the heavens are not going to fall upon you. Let us have some patience. Let us believe in the system. The system is not invented by this government. The system was there right since several years.
Okay, sir.
And therefore, unnecessary, I think, this kind of a...
Okay, very quickly, Anjali.
I think there are already systems for transparency and accountability. And I don't think anybody is suggesting that non-government organizations do not need to be transparent or accountable. But I think that there are laws already. Even in the Greenpeace case, the government, the reason why the High Court upheld Priya Pillai's case was that it was just being called anti-national. There was nothing illegal. In this case also, if the government has found something, it needs to be transparent about it. It needs to take necessary action under the laws that are there, not create arbitrary situations. As far as the Right to Information Act is concerned, I'd like to remind Mr. Sasrabuddhe that there hasn't been a Chief Information Commissioner of the Central Information Commission for the past 8 months. So we are unable to access any information for the first time since the law has been passed from the Prime Minister's office, from the Cabinet Secretariat. And on another note, the BJP and all other national parties are sitting in violation of the CIC's order of transparency
Anjali, that's a separate discussion. Sir, we have completely run out of time. Anjali, sorry. Very quick, one sentence, sir.
One sentence.
Yes.
It is that I think people need to understand that the big country like India, who decides what is adverse to national security? We have inherited, I told you in the last debate,
okay.
we have inherited the British tradition that our intelligence is empowered to decide. They don't take anybody's permission.
That is where the problem seems to lie, sir. That's where I think the problem seems to lie, when some intelligence organization decides what is national interest. I'm sure we'll have to do more debates on this. Thanks to all my guests. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue, the big picture, same time on Monday. Meanwhile, have a great weekend.